Support for WPR comes from Amplify Health. The doctors, clinics, and hospitals of Gunderson Health System and Bellin Health have come together to form Amplify Health. AmplifyHealth.org. A little empathy changes everything.
Bats, 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 funky little bats. Bats are the critters of the night. Fun little butterfly and bulldog bats. Bats know where everything's at. You don't go bump, you know.
Rosie Emery gets us going with her bat song to start our show today. Larry Mealer here. We're talking about bats. They have several species of bats called Wisconsin home, actually 8 species, matter of fact. And their importance to our ecosystem is really keenly felt when white nose syndrome devastated some of our local populations, especially the little brown bats. Fortunately, we're told that the bats seem to be making a bit of a comeback in Wisconsin and elsewhere. So that's great news. But I really want to introduce you to Allison Brokaw, a behavioral ecologist. She's a science communicator and the author of this great new book. It's titled The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats. The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats, and the subtitle, Demystifying These Often Misunderstood Creatures. Published this year by Timber Press. Allison's currently a postdoc fellow or researcher at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And as we talk with her, I hope you'll join in. What do you want to know about bats? I think she's got the answer. Give us a call. The number's 1-800-642-1234, or you could send an email to talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Allison Brokaw, welcome. Thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you describe yourself as a behavioral and sensory ecologist. Maybe you could talk about what that means.
Yeah, so basically it means I am interested in animal behaviors and how behaviors have evolved and how animals have adapted these behaviors to maximize their ability to get food, find mates, get around, etc. And then the sensory part of that is I'm interested in how they are using their different senses, particularly olfaction, so smell, to do those behaviors.
Yeah, your research, your PhD research had to do with smell, did it not?
Yes. Yeah, I was looking at how fruit bats use their smell to get around.
So did you have how did your interest develop with bats? You talk a little bit about it in the beginning of your book.
Yeah. So, I think I didn't even mention this in the book, but I kind of grew up loving animals, knowing I wanted to do wildlife science. We would see bats flying around. I grew up in eastern Pennsylvania. We would see bats flying around at night, kind of in the evenings. And then I did get the chance to see some tropical bats on a field trip to the Virgin Islands and could see them a little bit more up close and just kind of became fascinated. And then as I went to school and started doing, more in-depth research about different animals, about bats, I just realized how much there was still left to learn, and that fascinated me.
Well, I got to tell you, I really enjoyed your book, and for a couple of reasons. One, you're a very good writer. My academic department is life sciences communication. We actually offer a PhD in science communication. So you're a good writer, but the photos, I did want to comment on the photos. They're absolutely fantastic photos. And I remember interviewing Leanne Henyon, who wrote Night Magic, a book you'd probably like. Anyway, we got around to bats, and she was frustrated by the photos that people see of bats. And she said typically those are they're posed and so forth, and the bats are scared, and they come off looking mean, not scared. And your photos, absolutely fantastic photos, show them more in their natural state, doing pretty much anything imaginable. And when you're finished with the book, you have, I think, almost anyone's opinion of bats would change, if not for the writing, certainly for the photos, the visual effect of those photos.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. And I have to say, I can't take credit for most of the photos. A lot of the ones of bats in flight, over water, are the work of my colleagues and mentors, Brock Fenton, who is a professor in Canada, and then Price Sewell, who is a bat ecologist and consultant. And yeah, they were gracious enough to let me use their stunning photos, which really do show off, the personality and
Yeah.
The cuteness of these creatures.
Absolutely. Well, this and you were how were you prompted to write the book in the first place? I mean, just your love of bats, and you had some opportunity present itself.
Yeah. So back in, must have been maybe summer of 2021. So kind of, we were still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, height of things. And yeah, Timber Press reached out to me basically saying, we think bats could use some good press. What do you think about writing a book? And I was like, yes, please. And so, yeah, kind of, I'm very grateful for that opportunity, and that they thought of me and asked me to do this. And it was a really fun experience.
And you might describe what people are going to find when they go through this book. It's an amazing book about bats, believe me.
Yeah, so I tried to, in my head, sort of break it up into sort of three pieces. The sort of first few chapters are kind of about, all the fun facts about bat behavior, about ecology, how they get around, sort of imagining, what if we could be a bat, what would life be kind of like? What would we be experiencing? And then kind of trying to, as much as possible, link what bats are doing, what their behaviors are, to things that are familiar to people. So the way that we interact with each other, bats do a lot of, they have a lot of more similarities to humans and human behavior than we probably realize. And then towards the end, I really wanted to highlight and focus, sort of clearing up some of the myths around bats, particularly related to things like disease, and then also really highlight all the important things that bats are doing in our environments, and why it's important that we protect them and do what we can to keep them around.
Before I started your book, of course I kind of paged through it, but then I thought, I wonder how many Wisconsin bats are represented in this book. So I went back to your index, and we have 8 species. The big and little browns, we've got tricolored, we've got hories, we've got eastern reds, we've got silver-haired, I'm trying to remember them all, evening bats, and the one bat that you didn't have represented out of the 8, only one, which I thought was amazing, was the Keens.
Okay, yeah.
And the keen is kind of, it's sort of like the little brown. I mean, I don't ever ask me to tell the difference between the two of them. They look pretty much the same and about the same size. I thought you did really good to get 7 out of the 8, given all of the work you did. You traveled all over the world for this. I mean, not only for the book, but for your work and for your interest in bats.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate enough to have opportunities to do field work, studying bats specifically in Central America. So I've done field work in Belize and Panama and Mexico, and those places have incredible levels of bat diversity. I believe Mexico is in the top. If you were to list countries by number of bat species they have, I think Mexico is maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah.
It's pretty high up there. And then, I've also had the opportunity to do various types of bat work around the United States. So I mean, the book, I tried really hard to highlight as much as I could bats from around the world, but we all have our biases. And so I definitely talk a lot about bats in North America and in Central America, where I have the most experience.
How many species are there? I've forgotten. And there actually more are being discovered all the time, I guess.
Yeah, so the current count is 1,487 species of bats currently described by science. And the listeners can keep an eye on that number. If you go to batnames.org, that website is run by scientists from the American Museum of Natural History, and every 6 months or so, they update it with all the new species that have been described or redescribed. And so you can actually track that number in almost real time, which I think is really fun.
Yeah. Chuck in Juneau has a question for you. Maybe a tough one to answer. Hi, Chuck.
And every 6 months they update it with all the new stuff.
Oh, you're breaking up. I'm sorry to say, but I'll tell you what, I can sort of paraphrase. The caller, Chuck has a large old barn with a lot of holes and had a lot of trouble with bats making a mess in the barn. And that'll give us a chance to talk about guano in a minute. But is there any way to get bats to quit coming every year to that large old barn with all those holes?
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. And unfortunately, there's no perfect answer. There are definitely resources online. Bat Conservation International is a good one for sort of ways that we can minimize that risk. Patching up the holes as much as you can. If you know bats are living in a place, you want to avoid, sealing them up in that place. But there are sort of one-way exits that you can install.
Excluders, I think they're called, yeah.
Yeah, and basically it lets the bats leave, but makes it hard for them to get back in. Unfortunately, bats are very good at squeezing themselves into tight spaces. And then something that people often will try, and I can be met with good success if you've excluded them from an area, is providing an alternative roost. So having a bat box or bat house somewhere nearby keeps them around, keeps them, doing their good works in your neighborhood, but keeps them out of spaces where you don't want them.
Allison Brokaw, our guest today, her book is The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats, and subtitled Demystifying These Often Misunderstood Creatures. Questions for her, give a call. The number's 800-642-1234. You could email to talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mueller for WPR News. Talking with Allison Brokaw about her book, The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats. And again, you can join in at 800-642-1234. Email to talk@wpr.org. Lynn in Pewaukee emailed to share they were on a cruise to Australia, stayed overnight in a hotel in Cairns before visiting the Great Barrier Reef the next day, and the guide suggested they enjoy the sunset. So they were on their balcony at sunset, and suddenly thousands of fruit bats came out of the trees to hunt for insects. And Lynn said that was an amazing experience.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I'm a little jealous. I actually have not made it to Australia yet, and it's on the list of places and bats that I want to see.
You mentioned that in your book that nearly every unusual mammal behavior you can think of is done by bats. Only a couple of things you mentioned that they don't do.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I, in particular, am just so fascinated by bats is that diversity. And think of a sort of general behavior, whether it's a diet type. So there's bats that eat insects, which is most bat species in the world. But there's bats that specialize in things like scorpions and, venomous animals or poisonous animals. There's bats that are carnivores, bats that eat other bats. there's bats that live in all sorts of different places.
They're
Some of
found
my
pretty much everywhere, aren't they? Except Antarctica, I think.
yeah. I always like to say that pretty much, anywhere most people are traveling, that place, there's going to probably be at least one bat that lives there. And that's true for a lot of island areas as well, because bats can fly. They are really good at dispersing to some of these places that other animals, particularly other mammals, have a hard time getting to. So bats are often the only native mammal on many island areas.
And they're closely related to deer. I think it was whales. They're more closely related to deer and whales and dogs than with birds.
Yeah, so bats are mammals. Kind of they are related to all other mammals, including humans. I always like that fact because I think people often associate bats with rodents because they kind of look similar. They're around the same size. But in terms of the most recent common ancestor and how we think these mammals evolved, bats are more closely related to dogs and cats and whales than they are to rodents. So they're sky puppies, is what I like to say.
Oh, I like that term. That's great. Sky puppies. Eric in Portage has a question. Hi, Eric.
Hey, I built a really beautiful bat house out of cedar a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I have it on a pole aiming southwest, and so get the most sun. Never attracted a single bat.
Yeah. That's a lament.
It's definitely a challenge. There's bats can be picky. It can be hard to know exactly what they're looking for. One of the things I always like to recommend people do if they're wanting to put up a bat house is really look into the species of bat that live in your specific area, because some bats have different preferences. Some bats like it really warm. Some bats like it a little bit less warm. Particularly for Southwest, it's possible, depending on your orientation, that your bat box is actually too warm. So it's something to think about. Sometimes painting the bat boxes has been shown to sort of improve that thermal gradient and put it in a place where bats like it most. So painting your bat box is often linked to success. So if you haven't tried that, it's worth a shot. And then sometimes it's just patience. It can take several years for the bats to find the bat box and decide to use it.
Yeah. Sometimes people will find some bad guano and put it inside a new box too. I don't know that makes that much difference, but something that could be done. Thanks, Eric. Ryan in Madison. Hi.
Hi, thanks for taking my call of the show. So I have a bat box that I built a couple of years ago, and it's maybe a 1-inch opening for the bats. It's attracted some wasps. I'm wondering if that will deter the bats. I'm guessing it will, but
yeah. What do you think, Allison?
So normally a good practice with having a bat box out is even if bats haven't moved in yet, is keeping an eye on it and trying to clear out any sort of wasps or anything else that might have kind of moved in. Bats will usually not want to be roommates with those types of critters. So it's a good idea to kind of keep an eye on the maintenance of these boxes as you're waiting for the bats to find them and move in.
There, and Roger in Wanakee has a bat box question as well. So let's go there. Hi, Roger.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good.
I live town of Westport, north of Madison, in the woods of 4-acre woods, and I have a cedar-sided home, and had some carpentry work done. I did have bats in the belfry, but not anymore. What kind of a bat box would I be able to buy locally, and what kind of openings do I need to attract the bats that might be in the southern Wisconsin area?
Southern Wisconsin and woods.
So
Little Browns probably.
Yeah, or an off potentially big browns. So yeah, it's definitely something. Yeah, if you kind of look into the specific ecology of some of the bats known to be in those areas, one thing that can be challenging, especially if you're near a wooded area, is that the bats may already have a great home. So they may not move into a bat box if they've already found a good hollow tree roost or whatnot. So it does depend on the species. There are some good websites that you can find sort of bat biologist approved bat boxes.
Yeah.
Merlin Tuttle has some resources that for good brands that you can buy for pre-made ones. Bat Conservation International also has free plans if you wanted to build your own, and they provide a few options for you that you can choose to, depending if you want to mount on the side of a house or on its own pole, and based on the type of bats that might be in your area. So those are some good resources to check out as you're kind of making these decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Paul in Madison will give you a chance. Hi, Paul.
Hi there. I don't know if Allison has heard of this place or maybe been there already, but if anyone wants to have just an amazing bat experience, there's this place over in central Colorado called the Orient Land Trust. And basically, it used to be an old mine. The roof collapsed, and now it's just a giant hole in the ground, and is now colonized by some 150,000 migratory bats every year. And so if you go and visit during the summer, every night during sunset, this giant spiral of bats starts emerging from the hole, and they all just fly over your head and spread out into the valley to eat critters and pollinate crops. And just an amazing sighting of bats.
And where is it again, Paul?
The Orient Land Trust in the San Juan Valley.
Orient Land Trust in the San Juan Valley. Paul, thanks very much. Allison, I don't think you've been there.
No, I actually
judging
haven't
from the
heard
look
that
on your
one.
face.
Yeah. No, I'm taking notes. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. I will recommend, if your listeners are traveling and are interested in seeing some of these really incredible bat emergences within the United States. One of my favorite experiences, and it's hard to describe the experience, is Bracken Cave near San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah.
It is the world's largest colony of bats. It is estimated to be between 15 and 20 million individuals at peak summer. And it sounds like it's probably a little bit similar. The bats come out in this spiraling mass. We affectionately refer to it as the batnado. So it's this bat tornado of individuals come flying out of this kind of sunk in cave, and then go off to hunt for insects over the nearby agricultural fields. And it takes hours for all the bats to leave. The sound is incredible. You just hear the flapping of wings.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's a truly immersive experience. That there's a viewing deck, so you're kind of right there. The bats are circling above your head. Highly recommend if you have the chance to check that out. And the people running the preserve where the cave is found are doing a lot of good work to protect that area, protect those bats. Associated again with Bat Conservation International.
Everybody who I've talked to who has been there, like you, it's almost impossible to describe when they all come out. It's must be an amazing experience. Paul, thank you. Debbie in Reedsburg, your turn. Hi, Debbie.
Hi. I had a comment. I just went and bought Allison's book off Amazon. And then I wanted to know how much headway they made on the white nose syndrome for the little brown bats we have here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is some signs of hope, I guess I would say. As I think you mentioned in the intro, we're starting to see, at least in some areas, some stabilizing of the little brown bat population. So for context, white nose syndrome was first described in New York in 2006, and then pretty rapidly spread throughout much of the eastern coast, and then Midwest of the United States and Canada, and then is still slowly spreading, but it not at quite the same rates, either because of the types of species of bats or their behavior and their ecology. And the species, particularly little browns, northern long-eared bats, and tricolored bats were the hardest hit, experienced really rapid population declines. So populations are at least starting to stabilize. We're not seeing the same decline year after year. There is some hope and some evidence that they may be adapting or slowly evolving some kind of resistances, just in terms of, immune response. The hard thing with bats is they reproduce slowly. So many of the bats in North America, including the little browns, only produce one pup a year. So it takes a long time for populations to recover following a decline. So there is some sort of hope. One of the things that I've been advocating for, and a lot of the bat conservationists that I talk to who are working on this, some of the ideas and the conservation has shifted from, can we find a cure, which seems unlikely. It's just really hard to scale up any kind of vaccine or treatment for bats, and more about how can we support the populations that have survived? What can we do to make it easier for these bats that, have made it through a winter with white nose? What can we do to make it so that they can make it to the next winter and the winter after that? So supporting things like native habitats, preserving areas, that kind of thing, I think is going to be really important moving forward to keeping bats around as much as possible.
Yeah. Debbie, thanks very much for calling. And you just ordered the book while you're listening here. I'm glad you did. You're going to enjoy it for sure. I just want to go back to a previous caller that had bats in their 1800s barn. Lisa emailed, there's no way to seal up the openings in a barn like that. Lisa said that she set up lights in the barn and then put up several bat houses outside. And that strategy has been quite successful. And Lisa,
that's great.
She turns on the lights early spring before the bats arrive. So
that's a great solution. Generally, we, when I'm sort of advocating for like, how can we help bats? One of the things is, can we minimize the lights that we have on? But using lights as a sort of non-invasive tool to help keep bats away from areas you don't want them is a good one, and is definitely more recommended than more invasive kind of approaches. So
and then
that's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah, great to hear. And then she adds the bat houses, so she gives them. And I remember a guy called the show once, and he put up some bat houses, and he said in the summertime he enjoys watching them, those little browns, eat the mosquitoes. They're, as you say in the book, they probably don't eat 1,000 a day.
Yeah. So that's, it's always a challenge when people sort of, kind of are excited and are like, bats eat all these mosquitoes. And it's always, I don't want to break your hearts and tell you it's not true. Cause it's sort of true. Because bats do, some bats are definitely out there eating mosquitoes. And actually one of my good friends who did her PhD in Wisconsin, shout out Amy Ray, some of her work showed that the little brown bats and the big brown bats in Wisconsin are out there eating mosquitoes. She was doing diet analysis. So it is true. They do some of that work. And I also like to highlight, they're also eating lots of other pests, insects as well. So a lot of garden pests in particular. So things like the beetles and squash bugs and stuff that is likely to eat your, garden tomatoes. Bats are out there eating. And then for kind of more broadly, nationwide agriculture, bats are doing a lot for protecting crops like corn and cotton by eating the moths that plague some of these types of crops. So even if they're not eating mosquitoes, they're still doing good work to protect us, protect our food.
And we go back to that. Just a little sidebar. Some moths now have developed a different way of making noise when they flap their wings to confuse the bats. An evolving thing, which is an amazing world, isn't it? We live in.
Yeah, that is. That it's this. Millions of years old. What we call an evolutionary arms race, where the bats have developed a method, echolocation, for hunting down insects. The insects, develop the adaptation to be able to hear the bats coming. They develop or adapt these behaviors like evasive maneuvers, things like if you ever just see a moth just drop out of the sky, that is actually a technique to avoid being captured by something. And then some insects have taken it even farther and have developed ways to produce sounds themselves that interfere with bat echolocation and make it so that the bat misjudges where that insect is and misses, basically.
Yeah, and our bats here, all 8 of them use they're all insect eaters, so they use echolocation. You have an interesting chapter on echolocation. And there's, what are there, sort of 3 types of sounds? But go ahead and talk about echolocation.
So echolocation, it's a huge topic. It's really fascinating how bats have evolved the use of sound to get around their environment. Something most bats around the world use echolocation to some degree, though there is a whole section of bats that do not have echolocation. And what's really cool about bat echolocation is that because there's so many species doing it, they're really good at it, and there is all this variation in how they use it. So we see variation in the shape of the calls themselves. So what frequencies bats are using, how much they go from one frequency to another. We see bats use what are called frequency modulated calls, where you start at one frequency or one pitch and then slide to a new one. Some bats use constant frequency, where they just are emitting a single pitch for a little bit. And that's really cool because they take advantage of this Doppler compensation effect, which is this property of sound. When when we hear a siren go by, it sounds like the pitch is moving. That's actually not true. The pitch is the same, but the movement of the siren makes it sound like it's going up and down. And so bats are able to take advantage of that property of sound to improve their ability to capture insects, which is just I don't know, blows my mind. I could really dive into a lot of the nitty gritty of the echolocation, and we would be here for the rest of the afternoon. But bats, they're really good at it. They do a lot of really interesting things with sound, and it's just really fascinating the way that they've evolved these behaviors to.
Yeah. Another, you address, Wameng sent us an email, and whoops, my screen just jumped. So, I've got it back now. Why do bats carry so many different diseases, such as rabies and Ebola and so forth? And you had really straight on addressed that.
Yeah. So one thing I always like to remind people is that yes, it is true that bats carry diseases, but so does every other animal that exists. Humans carry tons of diseases, and we are more likely to get diseases from each other than we are from wildlife like bats. And then on the flip side, it is true that bats have some really interesting adaptations in terms of their physiology and their cell pathways and mechanisms and the way that their bodies signal immune responses. that have made it so that they may not get as sick from certain types of viruses, which is something that we can learn from. So if we can understand, what kind of cellular pathway, what sort of molecules are the cells releasing inside of a bat to respond to, an invading virus or bacteria, and how do bats minimize the side effects? How do they minimize inflammation? How do they minimize fever, and the effects on their body? If we can learn that, we can take advantage of that and potentially, develop treatments that sort of mimic those properties. And as far as rabies, I always like to also just throw out there that all mammals are susceptible to rabies. So as mammals, bats are not an exception to that rule. And with rabies in particular, it's hard because rabies is not something you want to mess with. If you suspect a rabies encounter, definitely consult your doctor. Don't wait. But only like 5% of bats that have been submitted for testing each year to organizations like the CDC come back as positive for rabies, whereas close to 20% of animals like raccoons and skunks and foxes that have been submitted for testing come back positive for rabies. So the actual incidence of rabies in bats is fairly low. And the best way to avoid it is just, don't handle and interact with wildlife if you don't have to. That's the best way to stay safe, both for you and for the animals.
Bill in Oregon, Wisconsin emailed to say they've been doing acoustic bat monitoring in their neighborhood for many years. A few years ago, Bill expanded their monitoring season into October and November. They've been quite surprised by the ebbs and flows of bats as a migrating species. And he wonders, has anyone come up with a good way to study the movement behaviors of our migratory bats? In Wisconsin, Bill believes we only have a couple of two full-time acoustic monitoring stations that contribute to our knowledge of bat behavior, migration.
Oh, that is an awesome question. Yeah, so studying migratory bats is a huge challenge, and has been for a long time. Bats they fly and they're small, so it's hard to put transmitters, radio collars, those types of things on them, because any weight you put on a bat, that bat now has to carry that around. And so we try to minimize that kind of impact. But there, in the past, just even past 5 years or so, even since I've been involved in bat research, there have been a lot of technological advances to be able to track bats, especially migratory ones. I was lucky enough to be involved with some migratory bat research in Northern California, using sort of geolocators that only took a couple points. We had to get those back to get the data. But now people are using these MODIS towers. So it's taking advantage of sort of existing infrastructure for like cell phones and GPS, and sort of trying to tap into some of those types of technologies. So if instead of us having to, be in a plane following a bat around to figure out where it's going, we can start to get these more passive pings of saying like, hey, the bat that has this tag was near this tower on these days, and sort of makes it easier to get a larger data set, and of specific locations. So definitely like a space to keep watching as we advance our tech and figure out how to solve some of these challenges.
Allison
really cool.
Brokaw, our guest today, her book is The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats, Demystifying These Often Misunderstood Creatures. You can join in, too, at 800-642-1234 or email to talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. WPR's one-day winter member drive is tomorrow, and we have a special challenge in effect right now. When 600 people donate before midnight tonight, a group of generous members will donate an extra $10,000. Still room for your gift. Go to WPR.org/donate. Talking with Allison Brokaw about bats and her book, The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats, Demystifying These Often Misunderstood Creatures. Great to have her with us today. It's a fascinating book. Dale in Baldwin had something to add, I believe. Dale, hi.
Yes, sir. Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Great show. I wanted to share with you another awesome bat experience. There is a bridge in Austin, Texas, called the Ann W. Richards Bridge. And every night, they over 1.5 million bats migrate there each year. They're Mexican free-tailed bats and put on an awesome show every night at dusk. It actually draws an estimated over 100,000 tourists each year go specifically just to watch the bats.
Oh, Dale, thank you. And Allison, have you been there?
I have, yeah, several times. Yeah, no, that's a great. I'm glad they mentioned that. That is a great spot to see bats, and it's great as a sort of conservation story because I believe kind of at some point in the last 20 or so years, the city of Austin actually wasn't really that thrilled to have these bats living in this bridge. And through the work of bat advocates and conservationists, they really kind of helped change the city's mind. And now the city has really embraced it as, tourism opportunity. It brings people to the city. Not just these bats are going out and eating lots of insects and doing their thing in the areas around Austin, but that it's kind of become this sort of something that makes Austin special. And I love that as somebody wants to advocate for bats as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Dale, for calling. Jan in Viroqua, your turn. Hi, Jan.
Hi. I've had a very happy cohabitation with bats at my rustic cabin in the woods of eastern Pennsylvania. They live at the top of the chimney inside. And I'm wondering, is there any reason for me not to continue this happy relationship? And if there's no reason not to, how can I help them? I don't know what kind they are. They are small and they are brown. Unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of the bats in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, they're kind of all small and brown. But that's great. I love that you're, wanting to continue to coexist. I think if it's working for you, I think it's fine. I would just recommend making sure that where the bats are living is separated from where people are living, just to avoid potential interactions. But if it's working and everyone's able to stay safe, then that's great. Kind of just continuing to, provide different habitats, whether it's roosting habitat or things like planting native plants in your gardens that are going to support native insects that are going to attract the native bats. Putting water sources out can be really great for helping support bats, especially in summertime when we maybe aren't getting as much rain. There's a lot of really simple things people can do to support bats without necessarily having to live with them if they don't want to.
Yeah. Thanks, Jan, for calling. Appreciate it. Tim in Blue Mounds, we'll give you a chance. Hi, Tim.
Well, hey there, Larry. How you doing?
Good. Appreciate the call.
Just a crazy story from many years ago when I first moved up to Wisconsin about 25 years ago. I lived in a bat house. Now, that might take some explaining, but I came up here with my cat that I called Kitty, and we moved into this A-frame that was covered with cedar-shaped shingles. And it had a porch out front with a railing on it that was about, maybe 4 feet away from the way the roof came down. And every night when the sun went down, all these little bats would come climbing out from underneath the shingles on the side of this old house. And the poor cat was always trying to catch him. And one night he jumped up on the porch railing, and you could see the bats coming around him while he tried to catch him. And I swear it looked like he was practicing some kind of Tai Chi or something.
Okay. Well, I'm glad the cat didn't catch any. For sure, Tim. Thank you so much for that story. The ecological roles. I think some of our listeners, many of them, are familiar with some of the roles that bats play here in Wisconsin with our insect eaters. They play, and they probably have other advantages as well for us in the field of agriculture.
So we've talked a lot about the insect eaters, as that is most of what we find in North America. That's what you find in Wisconsin. Bats are also doing a lot of other important, what we call ecosystem services. So things that kind of help ecosystems, help humans, and that includes pollinating. So there are many species of bats, mostly in tropical regions, though there are a few pollinator bats found in sort of the southwest and southern United States as you get closer to Mexico. So they help plants reproduce, and this does include commercially important plants. One that listeners might be familiar with, or have at least heard of, would be bats are a primary pollinator for agave, which is where we get tequila from. So they're actually, really important for pollinating that plant. They also pollinate many other sort of tropical fruits that have really important commercial values, especially in places like Asia and Africa. This includes durian, jackfruit. Another one that listeners might encounter in the United States is dragon fruit. Bats are a pollinator of that species as well, which is a major Mexican commercial crop. And then bats are also important seed dispersers. So our fruit bats, after they've eaten a fruit and they fly to a new place, they help disperse the seeds of that fruit. And that can be really important for maintaining genetic diversity of these plants, and also just helping with things like reforestation, helping replant areas that may have lost trees and that kind of thing, which is also going to benefit humans for lots of reasons.
Yeah. What's been the buzz around your book? I mean, is it doing well? Have you gotten some good positive feedback?
Yeah, I think so. I've had a chance to talk to a lot of people like you, which has been amazing. And it's always great to hear, the stories like the ones people have been calling in about, kind of, curiosity and interest and support in bats. And honestly, not very much. I get very few comments these days about how bats are scary or how people don't like them, and that just makes me really happy. Because it means all the work that myself and other bat communicators and scientists are doing, is working. We're just trying to spread the love.
Well, you've done a really good job with this book. I can tell you that for free.
Thank you.
The Weird and Wonderful World of Bats is the title. Allison Brokaw is the author, and it's been a real pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I could talk about bats for forever, so
well,
not a problem.
And I can tell you, we didn't touch. We touched a very small part of your book, and so there's lots more in store for those who pick up a copy. Thanks, Allison. Coming up, we're going to take a look at solar energy with our next guest. I'm Larry Mueller for WPR News.
She has never seen. Bats of the night. Fun-little butterfly and bulldog bats. Bats know where everything's at. They don't go bump, you know.
Great to have you with us here on WPR News. Larry Mealer here, turning our attention to solar. And we've got a small village of Deerfield, Wisconsin, located east of Madison, has several solar projects that have saved local governments as much as $1 million in energy costs since 2018. There was a Deerfield, there was a nonprofit organization involved with this, and they are helping install solar projects really across the state. Larry Mealer here with my guest, Jackie Harrison Jewell, who is executive director of the Couillard Solar Foundation. Couillard Foundation is a nonprofit, promotes the expansion of solar energy in the state. And I'm wondering, is your home or business powered by solar energy, or maybe your school? Do you want to know how to get affordable solar panels installed? You can join in. The number's 800-642-1234, or you could send an email to talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Jackie, welcome. Thanks for taking time to be with us today in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Couillard Solar Foundation is a nonprofit, and it's based in Deerfield, East Madison. Talk about what the foundation does?
Sure. The foundation was started in 2018 by Cal and Lori Couillard. Cal sold a business of his and invested a good portion of that business into the foundation with the goal of helping Wisconsin nonprofits get access to solar power. Largely that was due at the time to the fact that while there were tax credits available for private individuals and for businesses, nonprofits couldn't take advantage of that. And nonprofits themselves serve a huge role in helping communities across the state. Organizations like schools, homeless shelters, food banks, churches, all of them have really important missions, but a lot of times they really couldn't justify or afford what it would take to convert to solar. So our organization supports two grant programs. One is called Solar for Good, and Solar for Good helps service-oriented nonprofits, like many of the ones that I mentioned. Solar on Schools is our second grant program, and that one supports private schools from K-12 through universities. Over the course of the 6 or 7 years that we've been in business, we have helped over 275 organizations get access to solar, and the amount of energy that's being produced by these arrays is now more than 14 megawatts of solar power.
14 megawatts.
Yeah.
That's a lot of megawatts.
That's a lot. That's a lot of power. Yes, it's true. I don't have at my fingertips how many homes that would power, but a couple of years ago, before Wisconsin started installing these large solar farms, we actually CSF projects comprised about 1% of all the solar power that was on the Wisconsin grid. So we've made we are very proud of the fact that we've made a real impact on solar adoption. One of the reasons why we focus on nonprofits is because nonprofits is really trusted organizations within their communities. We know that when the nonprofit accepts solar and installs it and can see the benefits of it, a lot of times their communities, if it's a church, it's their congregation, if it's a school, the parents and children, they see that impact of solar and they become more comfortable with it and more comfortable with that idea of the importance and benefits of solar power for them and for their homes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If somebody does something and you look at it and maybe I could do that too.
Exactly.
Aaron in Oshkosh has a question. Let's go there. Aaron, hi.
Yes, hello, good day, everyone. Thank you very much for doing the show and taking my call. I hope that you are all well.
We are indeed. What's on your mind?
All right. I'll cut to the quick. There are a couple things I'd like to bring up. One of them is what I think is the most important. In disclaimer, I will tell you that I am a proponent of what I call point of use production, point of use consumption when it comes to renewable energy. And that's because last time I checked, at least about 61% of the electricity is lost to ground when it goes to high voltage transmission. It's one of the only consumer products that loses the vast majority of its product before it gets to market. So with that said, one of the things that bothers me and is an endemic problem in the industry, and I think is personally false advertising, is the way that the utilities present their bills to their customers. If you look at these bills, you see a nominal rate of 10, 12 cents an AC kilowatt, as an example, that the client is getting charged for their electricity, and then on top of that is the vast majority of the bill, which they hide in service fees, peak demands, and other things, and it really skews the general public's understanding of their utility bill because.
Bills and billing here, Aaron. I want to, we've only got a few minutes for the show, so I want to move along and ask about bills and billing when it comes to solar itself, Jackie.
Right. If I interpret somewhat what you're getting at, I think it is important for people to understand that it certainly could be a better situation for, in the industry, solar arrays are often called, solar arrays owned by individuals and businesses are often called DERs, or distributed energy resources. And I think that there could be a situation where the payback from the utility company to the solar array owner, could be more advantageous. But there are other benefits for installing solar as well. And one of them is that when you have solar power, the caller's right. That power is being produced locally. It does not have to travel from any energy production site. It's pretty much right there. And it's available for the owner of the solar array to use. And then whatever they don't use is put back onto the grid and is used by their neighbors. So it is a real advantage for a community to have solar in that community because it adds extra power to the grid, and then that power is available to anyone who needs to use it.
I want to go back to Deerfield for a minute because there are so many stories that you could tell about. I mean, just to explain what's happened in Deerfield over these years since 2018.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is great. So we have what we call in Deerfield. Deerfield is a little village. It's about 3,000 people, and we have over 600 kilowatts of solar power, which I know it's hard sometimes to visualize that, but that's a pretty big chunk of solar power. There are several installations. There's a large installation on the roof of the high school. There is what's called a ground mount installation by the wastewater treatment plant. And then in other places, there are some test sites. One of the things, we're kind of geeky about solar, and we love to learn more about it. So we've got a couple of, there's an installation by the Deerfield garage, which is are two identical solar arrays, one of which has monofacial solar panels and the other has bifacial solar panels. And bifacial solar panels means that it produces power from the front and the back of the solar panel. And the reason why we did that for that installation is we did it so we could test how much more power a bifacial solar array can produce than a monofacial solar array in exactly the same situation. And then we have the inverters, which are the things that convert solar energy into something that is usable by a building. And so they're side by side on the outside of the building so that anyone who is interested can go up and see at any given time how much power is being produced by these two identical arrays, but one with two different kinds of solar panels right next to each other. So the reason where we have all of these arrays all around the village is both to support the village, to create a situation for a small municipality that doesn't have a lot of income, and find ways for them to save money, but also to be an example to the rest of the state and to the world that solar power is actually really valuable on many scales. It can be just as valuable for a small village as it is for a large urban community, and it's pretty easy to do. The other part of this solar tour, and this is a tour, it's like a self-guided tour. If you are interested in coming to Deerfield, you can take advantage of that and go around and see all of these yourself. We also have, as part of that tour, solar canopies, which are an invention of our founder, Cal Couillard, and his partner, Amr Arafat. These canopies are designed to make solar beautiful. They are pavilions, really, essentially, that produce power. So it creates a community space, it creates a great environment, but it also produces power for the community.
That's really fascinating. Mark in Wisconsin Dells has a question for you. Let's go there. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Larry. Yeah, I've got solar panels on my roof, and I've had them for several years. I think they produce about 50% of my electricity. And I see other arrays around that are mounted on the ground, and I just have often wondered, could I get electrocuted by fooling around with these solar panels?
No. I mean, obviously, we don't encourage people to go and fool around with a solar array. There is electricity there, and it is really important to be respectful of that. But solar arrays are safe. They are designed to be outdoors, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't be able to collect sunlight. And they're designed to be safe for people to be around them. I definitely do not advocate, climbing up on a solar array or anything like that. You don't need to brush the snow off your array. You don't need to really deal with it at all. One thing you do want to monitor with a solar array is to monitor that it's working regularly. So if you are a homeowner, check your dashboard. Usually there's an online dashboard that shows that your array is producing power. Check that regularly, because if something were to happen, say with the inverter or with a connection, that would be a way for you to know. And then you could respond to and have that corrected right away and get the most of your array that you can.
Mark, thank you again. Louise wonders, their roof is 15 years old. Are they still eligible to have solar installed?
Well, that's a really good question. We do not generally. You don't want to put a solar array on an older roof. You want your roof to be pretty new. I would say probably 5 years or less. And the reason for that is that while the solar array can shelter the roof underneath it to some extent, I mean, you will have to eventually have that roof replaced, right? I mean, I think lots of times they recommend right about 15 years to replace. And so you'd have to pay to have that array taken off, your roof replaced and put back on. So that is a thought. But there is also, if you are in an if you have the yard space or you have the grounds to do that, there's also the ground mount option, which doesn't require you to replace your roof, and you can still take advantage of the benefits of solar.
Yeah, I have a friend who has that situation and has been very, very happy over the years with the results, and it's sitting out in the lawn area.
Yeah, they're great.
Paul in the Rockland area has a question. Hi, Paul.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Appreciate the call. What's on your mind?
I have a parcel of land. It's about 10 acres. It faces south at about a 40-degree angle, and I've always thought, boy, this is pretty ideal, I would think, for solar. And I don't know if there's until I win the lottery, I personally can't develop it. But is there any organization, anybody looking to invest in that kind of property to give me a rule? It's just too far out. Need to be closer to a big city? Is it too big a property? I don't know.
Sure. What you're talking about is something that's commonly called, potentially either a community solar, which is a relative, it's not as large as a solar farm, but it's, smaller. And that's something where they could build a ground mount array, and that could be then invested by people invest in it and they get the benefit of that power. Or a solar farm, and that would be a situation where a developer would approach you, and those can be pretty large. They can, for example, last year the PSC, the Public Service Commission, approved a solar farm that was one of the largest in the state. I think that if you were interested in something like that, you could reach out to a potential solar developer and see if there was something, if somebody was interested in that. Generally, those are fairly large projects, and they take a while to develop.
Yeah. And solar developers like that, I mean, where would you go to find something?
That's not my area of expertise. Yeah. I'm not sure who to approach. You could reach out to an organization like Renew Wisconsin, which is a policy organization for clean energy.
Yeah, that makes very good sense. Paul, thank you so much for calling. Now, as you're working, the Couillard Solar Foundation, it works with nonprofits, and I'm sure there are people that are members of nonprofits, and by a nonprofit, that can be a church, it could be a school, it could be pretty much any kind of government building.
Absolutely. Yeah, we call those folks champions. And, if you have an organization that you think would benefit by having a solar array, or your organization's been talking about one, we recommend that you take a look at you can come to our website, which is CouillardSolarFoundation.org, or, even just Google Solar for Good or Solar on Schools, because we partner with, like Solar for Good, we partner with Renew Wisconsin, and Solar on Schools, we partner with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, or MREA. And there are application periods. In fact, coming up on April 1st is the application period for the spring round of solar grant application review for Solar for Good. And we're actually currently in the process of an application period for Solar on Schools. For both of those organizations, the grant period is 2 times a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And if your organization is interested in kind of how do I get to that point, you certainly can contact either us or those organizations. We'd be happy to walk you through the process. We love working with champions, because usually those folks are really, really committed and are very interested in helping their organization, get that solar.
And it's a kind of a cost sharing opportunity, isn't it? Or
what the grant opportunity is that we grant up to half of the solar panels an organization needs for their array. So there are some size limitations, but most arrays fall well within that, up to half. And so that actually, it just really reduces the initial cost of the array for the organization. That, in addition to the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits for nonprofits, the 30%, which and in some cases possibly more, which is still legally available to all nonprofits. Then and there are some other benefits that they can get. So it can really bring the price down for a nonprofit to do that, to build that solar array on their property.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. And you work with Trin Solar, if I'm not mistaken. You have a partnership with them, and Trin Solar.
Trina Solar. We actually got a wonderful donation from them at the end of the year last year. They donated several, a few thousand solar panels to us. They had a situation where they were looking to donate solar panels. We were happy to take them. These solar panels can be used in different projects, but we are dedicating a good chunk of those to a new program that we have called the Wisconsin Solar for Homes Project, where we're partnering with another nonprofit, Coulee Cap in La Crosse, that provides weatherization services to low and middle income folks in the Vernon County region, and we're going to be providing those solar panels to them so that they can reduce the cost for putting solar on their homes and thus lower their energy burden.
And what projects are you working on right now?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There are several schools. Actually, probably a good one to tell you about. We just are working right now at the process of putting in. CISA 10 is an organization that helps schools get access to energy efficiency type programs. So we have a sort of a project in La Crosse, in the La Crosse area, not just in La Crosse, but the La Crosse area. There's several schools that are putting on arrays, and they are going to be installing solar arrays, some fairly good sized ones. There's about 10 of them involved in this, and then those schools are going to be able to get the solar arrays up and running, and then they can also incorporate as part of this process, incorporate information about clean energy and solar into their curriculum for their students.
So that's great, and I know you're working on some projects in Madison.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a couple of things that places you can see in Madison is, we did this one last summer, was the Dane County Humane Society. They actually used one of our canopies to create a flight pen for the rehabilitation of raptors and wild birds. And so this is a really cool thing. It's a beautiful, it's a structure. It's not technically a building because it's not really, it's enclosed, but only just to keep the birds in place. And it's powered, and the power produced by that structure also then supports the electrical use of the Humane Society.
That is really cool. And again, Couillard, to get to, we'll probably have up on our today's program, we'll have a link on the Larry Mealer Show for it. But Couillard is French, so it's Couillard.
Yep. CouillardSolarFoundation.org. And we have a lot of information on our website about our projects, and also some information about some of the benefits of solar and different ways you can reach out to us. I also am happy, I tell people this all the time, I'm happy to do presentations to organizations or groups who are interested. And so we have done several of those over the years, and that's another thing we love to talk about, the benefits of solar.
Well, I tell you what, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. You're doing some really great work, Jackie, and the Couillard Foundation, Solar Foundation, certainly is as well. And I really appreciate your time today, and hope we can do this again down the road.
I hope so, too. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Jackie Harrison Jewell is the executive director of the Couillard Solar Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization, promotes the expansion of solar energy, and they work with nonprofits. So if you got a school or a church or whatever, you might go online to their website and see how you might be even able to apply for some of those funds. Coming up, we're going to take a look at Aldo Leopold. This is Aldo Leopold Week, and looking forward to that. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News.
Leopold says, "There are some who can live without wild things, and some who cannot. These essays are the delights and dilemmas of one who cannot. Like winds and sunsets, wild things were taken for granted until progress began to do away with them. Now we face the question whether a still higher standard of living is worth its cost in things natural, wild, and free."
Jim Fleming reading. That's music, and Jim Fleming reading from What Chapter a Day is airing this week. It features all this week readings from Aldo Leopold's The Sand County Almanac. You can hear Chapter a Day at 9:30 p.m. on WPR News. and 7 p.m. on WPR Music. Or if you can't wait, you can always listen to Chapter a Day anytime at WPR.org/chapter. Larry Mueller here. And on the show this week, we're celebrating Leopold Week. It's an annual event to honor Leopold. And with us today, Buddy Huffaker is the executive director and board president for the Aldo Leopold Foundation, of course, based in Baraboo. And as we talk with Buddy, I hope you'll join in the conversation. What do you want to know about Aldo Leopold and his legacy as a conservationist? Have you read probably his most famous work, I'm sure, A Sand County Almanac? Or maybe you visited his shack on the Wisconsin River. Comments, give us a call. The number is 1-800-642-1234, or you could send an email to talk@wpr.org. Buddy Huffaker, welcome back. Good to have you with us today.
Oh, always a joy and honor to be with you, Larry. Thanks for helping us celebrate Leopold Week.
Yeah, and just in passing, we were just talking with Jackie Harrison Jewell from the Couillard Solar Foundation, and on her way out the door, she mentioned that I think there's some solar installations that she helped with.
That's correct. I was going to make that connection as well. Yeah, we were the beneficiaries. The Couillard Solar Foundation, I think it was 2 years ago now that we really expanded our solar array to be a totally net zero energy organization. And yeah, if you got any questions or want to see it in action, come up and see us at the Leopold Center.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those who aren't familiar, tell us about the Aldo Leopold Foundation and its mission.
Well, let me start just quick in case any listeners aren't familiar with who Aldo Leopold was. He is kind of often referred to as the father of the modern conservation movement. He was a UW professor in the 1930s and 40s and is credited with creating the fields of wildlife management, ecological restoration. He's also kind of considered the father of the wilderness protection movement, wrote about sustainable agriculture. So a really broad and deep thinker about all things kind of conservation, ecologically related issues. And as you mentioned, he is the author of A Sand County Almanac. That's really why the world still talks about him and his work. That we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of the book last year, and in it he puts this idea of a land ethic forward, really asking us to realize that we're all part of the biological community, not apart from it. And then that means we have a vested interest in ensuring the land and our environment is healthy so that we remain healthy. And this idea has been so powerful and so motivating. The book's been translated into 15 different languages. The 5 children of Aldo and Estella Leopold, after their father passed, realized that the world kind of wanted and needed this message. And so they created the foundation and entrusted it with their family farm that sits on the banks of the Wisconsin River outside of Baraboo, and the rights to their father's writings. And so we now help kind of move that idea forward into the world. So as you said, people come see the historic site and what they put in motion there, how they restored the land to health, how they planted trees that were used to build the Leopold Center. And then we help push out and promote this idea of a conservation ethic throughout Wisconsin and all across the world. And that's what Leopold Week is where we gather people in conversation about where conservation has come from, where we're at, and where we're headed.
The first Leopold Week event took place in Lodi, Wisconsin in 2000, I believe, and an old friend of mine, rest his soul, UW rural sociologist Tom Heberlein, had a big role in that.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. It is the 25th anniversary, and we credit Tom with being the visionary and the force behind the first Leopold Week gathering 25 years ago at the Lodi Public Library. And it kind of caught like a spreading, let's say, prescribed burn, not wildfire. And prior to COVID, there were celebrations across this week, this first week in March, which I'll come back to in just one sec. in 30 different locations all across the state and across the country. And then COVID, of course, disrupted that because these were usually community gatherings where people would come together and read the book aloud, talk about what challenges their community were facing. And because of COVID, those gatherings couldn't take place, but we had a lot of people reach out to us and say, well, we still want to gather in some way. And so we kind of pivoted and started virtual programming then. And that's been going on for 5 years. This will be the 5th year of kind of virtual Leopold Week, if you will, where we have big name writers and speakers come and they kind of complement local events. So last year we had 5,000 people join us from 40 different countries all around the world. But what we're excited about this year is to announce that thanks to Tom Heberlein's vision and generosity and an estate gift that he named the Leopold Foundation the beneficiary of, we have a pot of money to launch mini grants starting next year with Leopold Week 26, where groups can get small grants to reconvene and rejuvenate these community readings and gatherings. So if you're interested in that, visit the Leopold Foundation website, just aldoleopold.org, and go to our Learning Hub tab, and you'll find information on how to apply for a small grant to host your own event next year.
Oh, that's just great, and so like Tom.
Oh yeah, really. And Tom was great because, well, as a rural sociologist, he really recognized the power and importance of community and bringing people together. And because of his prominence as a professor and just his other personal endeavors, he really got kind of the top names in the state of Wisconsin in the conservation community to come together at these events. And it was at one of them when State Senator Mark Miller was there, and he's like, this is terrific. And then got Governor Doyle at that time to kind of recognize Leopold Week as a statewide celebration the first week in March. And let me just share the backstory of that because the weather today, Larry, has me in Baraboo instead of in the studio with you. And that is part of the origins of Leopold Week. Like Tom and all these outdoor enthusiasts wanted to be outside, but as so often in early March, you want to be outside, but the weather doesn't quite want you to be outside. And so they decided, let's get together, let's read a Stan County Almanac, and we can at least dream of being outside if we can't be outside.
That's just great. Well, this week you have 3 authors who took part and are taking part in this series of talks called the Land Ethic Live. And I think 2 of these talks have already happened. The final one's tomorrow night, I guess.
No, we have the first ones happened. So
okay.
The week kicked off with an event at the UW Arboretum. Again, kind of going back to that original model of a community reading. We're thrilled to be in partnership with Wisconsin Public Radio, and you can listen to Jim Fleming's beautiful, soothing voice read a Stan County Almanac aloud to you all week long. And then last night was our first public event. It was with author Margaret Wrinkle, the author of The Comfort of Crows. And it is just a beautiful book, set up very much like a Stan County Almanac, walks you through the seasons. I interviewed her, so if, after today you want more of me, or maybe more importantly, more of Margaret, you can go back and watch that recorded program. And then tonight we'll be live with the author Camille Dungy and her book Soil. It's called The Story of a Black Mother's Garden, and it's a really beautiful book about using garden as a metaphor for the importance of diversity and having your hands in the soil. And then tomorrow night will be Amy Tan. Most people know her as a fiction novelist, the author of the Joy Luck Club, but who in 2016 kind of found herself enchanted with birds and started sketching and journaling, and she just released a book called The Backyard Bird Chronicles, and it's also a really lovely book, kind of set up in a journalistic style with sketches and insights. And so all of these really kind of mimic and are extensions of Leopold's Stan County Almanac, where there are people that are just engaging the natural world, whether it be afar or just, the container garden right out their back door.
Yeah, that's what a lineup. That's such a good lineup. And now how can people participate in these two speakers now. We've got Margaret tonight and Amy tomorrow night.
Yeah, so all are free, and you just go again to the Aldo Leopold website, aldoleopold.org, and on the top banner, there's a link that will take you right to the registration page. And they're all recorded, so if you sign up for one, you sign up for all. We're trying to make it easy. You can catch them live at 7 o'clock Central Time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, or you can go back and watch them at your leisure anytime.
That's so great, and I guess they reflect in many ways the legacy of Aldo Leopold, don't they?
Well, I think very much so, and in a couple of respects. I mean, one, they're kind of just set up in the same narrative style, so they're emulating Leopold and many other writers, Rachel Carson, Thoreau, and others. But I think, for the Leopold Foundation, why we see it really important to identify and amplify some of these other voices is that near the end of a Sand County Almanac, Leopold writes, "Nothing so important as an ethic is ever written. It evolves in the minds of a thinking community." And so Leopold himself, was wanting and hoping others would pick up the charge. And I think nobody would be more thrilled than Aldo Leopold to see these 3 books in print and people reading them and engaging them and them being prompts and motivators for millions of people to engage the natural world. That's the ongoing work that the foundation is all about and that embodies Leopold's land ethic.
Buddy Hofecker, our guest today, Executive Director of the Aldo Leopold Foundation. We're talking with him about Aldo Leopold Week. It's a great time to remember Aldo, but then also look ahead to what we're doing and what we can do better, and to reflect on the writings, especially from Sand County Almanac, of his work. If you have, maybe you have been part of an Aldo Leopold tribute, or maybe you have a question about Leopold or the foundation, I hope you'll join in. The number to call is 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or you could email us. The email address is talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mueller for WPR News.
Acts of creation are ordinarily reserved for gods and poets, but humbler folk may circumvent this restriction if they know how. To plant a pine, for example, one need be neither god nor poet, one need only own a shovel. By virtue of this curious loophole in the rules, any clodhopper may say, "Let there be a tree," and there will be one.
Jim Fleming again reading for chapter a day as they read this week from Aldo Leopold's work. It's great to hear. But how does that hearing make you feel? Hearing that make you feel?
It really is a different experience to hear a book read aloud than to just read it yourself. Extra powerful when it's a beautiful voice like Jim. But preparing for my interview of Margaret Wrinkle last night, I listened to some of her book as an audio book in addition to reading some of it. And she narrated it herself or read it herself. And it really did kind of help bring her as an author and as the narrator of the book to life. And I think, again, that's what Tom Heberlein recognized with the power of these community readings is that getting people together, it's kind of that pausing for breath and listening collectively to a voice of wisdom and insight and then followed by some discussion. Just creates a different connection, again, those kind of communal bonds. And so we try to, I think there's the power in doing that in person. We try to replicate that with our programs. Margaret did a reading. Camille and Amy will do a reading. And so hearing those words, kind of bring the action to life, so to speak, is just really powerful. And it just reminds you how insightful some of these authors are.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about Leopold now. He was a scientist, but he was kind of also a poet. He's been described as a practical idealist. You,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
going to say, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a great description. I think first point you made is he really was a trained scientist and naturalist, unlike some of the earlier kind of nature writers. So when you read Leopold, you're getting an ecology lesson. He doesn't use a lot of scientific terms, as you say. He uses more prose and metaphors and poetry. But you are learning about how the biological, ecological world operates. And then I think what's really fascinating about Leopold is he puts this idea of the land ethic out there. There's this kind of philosophical challenge to rethink and reframe humanity's relationship to the rest of the world. But he also kind of does it in this very practical, pragmatic way. He's planting trees. They die. Go plant some more trees. And so I think his writing is really accessible, and it's both philosophical and visionary, but also kind of practical and pragmatic. And I would also add, I mean, he worked really hard on his writing. So that lyrical prose that jumps off the page as you hear Jim read it, he belabored over that to get it to that point. So it's also a testament to his patience and persistence in really developing really spectacular prose.
Yeah, it really is. And I bet you've written or you've read a Sand County Almanac more than once, maybe multiple times. I expect you discover new things with each reading.
It really is one of those books that every time you dip into it, you find something new. One of the beauties is you can kind of dip into it anywhere, right? So if it's March, well, just open it to March and start there. Or if it's March and it's gray and gloomy and you want to think about, summer, jump to July or read one of the essays in the back and then come back to the front. But I love the line that former U.S. Forest Service Chief Jack Ward Thomas used once. He said, "I read a Sand County Almanac every year on my birthday just to see what I've learned." So it's also one of those books that as you bring your new self to this old text, you learn about yourself and how you've grown and how the world has changed. And so it's one of those books that really is timeless in that sense. But then also always timely, because every time you're in it, there's something new and something is revealed that you weren't ready for the previous time you read it.
Thinking about it, it's nice to celebrate and really call attention to Aldo Leopold in a week's time. But there are other ways to honor Aldo Leopold. I think. It's great to participate in one of these events. But what can folks do to honor Leopold and his legacy?
Well, there's a lot of things. So, participate in these events. Pick up a copy of the book and, read it or give it to a friend or family member. In terms of gauging the Leopold Foundation, we open for public visitation May 1st, and then we have self-guided tours available, and then the Leopold Shack itself is open on Fridays and Saturdays. We have, in the fall of the year, an amazing wildlife spectacle that unfolds right behind the shack on the banks of the Wisconsin River, when up to 15,000 sandhill cranes will come to roost every night. And so we have a series of sandhill crane viewing blinds and tours that you can go on. And then this year we're doing a special event on June 27th and 28th in conjunction with the Milwaukee Public Museum. It's called a Bio Blitz. And what happens is we have special scientists that know all about the birds and the pollinators and the herptiles and the fish will come out, and we'll try to inventory all the biological diversity on the 4,000-acre Leopold Pines Conservation Area and document that species diversity. And so you can be here, you can learn about the species that these scientists are finding as they come back and give reports, and there'll be some other public education activities going on. So that's going to be a really fun and special weekend. So those are some of the ways you can engage the Leopold Foundation, but then also on your own, we really just promote getting outdoors, going for a hike, visiting a state park, starting a garden, anything to connect yourself to the natural world and remind yourself of how we're all connected is really in keeping with the Leopold legacy and a way to celebrate that statewide heritage and connection to the land ethic.
Yeah. And just going back to Leopold, that piece of land that you're sitting on, that was a pretty, it does not look, it looks much different today than it did when Leopold bought it and started work on it.
Well, yeah, again, a testament to his vision, his patience, his persistence, but that's also one of the beauties of a Sand County Almanac is it's really this chronicling of a family taking care of pretty marginal, unspectacular land. They're not in Yosemite. They're not at the Grand Canyon. They're just at this little kind of, dirt farm along the Wisconsin River, and they come to learn about it and care for it and really come to love it. And I think it reveals and opens up to all of us, again, whether it's our backyard or county park or state park, that these places are special. They're worth our love, our attention, and they don't have to be spectacular. Yeah, go to those places for sure because they're awe-inspiring and magnificent. But also let's not forget about just all the landscapes that we're in every day.
And I want to go back, before we're done here, just go back and review because people are going to have a chance to hear Margaret Renkel and also Amy Tan. So revisit that for us.
Yeah, so we got 3 great speakers this week. They all take place at 7 o'clock Central Time, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. You can catch them live, or again, you can watch a recording of each of them. The first night was Margaret Renkel, the author of The Comfort of Crows. She is a essayist for the New York Times, so you may be familiar with her work. The second, which will be tonight, is Camille Dungy, the author of Soil. She's a professor of poetry and literature at Colorado State University. And then tomorrow night will be Amy Tan, the well-known novelist, author of the Joy Luck Club, talking about her most recent book titled The Backyard Bird Chronicles, and her kind of adventure and journey and coming to learn about and love the birds of her backyard. So again, all 3 in the kind of spirit of a Sand County Almanac, all available for free to watch live or recording, and you can access them through our website, aldoleopold.org, and the banner at the top will take you to a link to register for all of those events.
Buddy, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. I really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to your next visit.
Well, thanks to you and WPR as well, Larry. Always great to be with you.
Buddy Huffaker is the executive director of the Aldo Leopold Foundation. So always fun to talk with him. And a reminder, Chapter a Day is reading Aldo Leopold's The Sand County Almanac all this week. You can hear Chapter a Day at 9:30 p.m. on WPR News, at 7 p.m. on WPR Music channels, and you can listen to Chapter a Day anytime. Just go to WPR.org/chapter. Well, thank you so much for listening. It was a fun day filled with lots of good topics on the Larry Mealer Show. And this and all of our shows are a team effort. We got a couple of producers for you, Clara Neipert and Joel Patnaud. We have technical directors Lee Rayburn and Jeff Robbins. Our executive producer is Jill Nadeau. I'm Larry Mealer. Thank you again for listening. And hey, stay with us. Lots more in store here on WPR News.